Hi, I'm Dr. Lachelle Weemy. Welcome to the 6-day Mindset Magic Healing Frequency Experience, where I am going to take you through a very intentional 6-day journey on how to utilize the AO scan technology to help your mindset and to bust through blocks that you've had and to improve the quality of your life. I hope you are as excited about this as I am to teach you. What you're going to experience over the next 6 days is a short mini video that I'm going to give you some background as well as detailed instructions on how to use one small segment of the technology, knowing that this is just a sliver of what's possible with this. This is going to be a very manageable, step-by-step way for you to actually utilize this technology to the best of your ability over the next couple of days. Now, before we get started, I wanted to give you some very basic quantum physics lessons. This is not meant for you to have to A, know everything, or B, feel like you have to know everything. I really just want to give you some little background knowledge so that you can have more trust in the science behind how this is working. Okay. Now, the first thing that I want to mention is that many of us have learned about physics in high school science classes, maybe college. And what I want to point out here is that the physics that we learned about in school were really based on Newtonian physics. What does that mean? When Isaac Newton was sitting under the tree and the apple fell on his head, he discovered the law of gravity. Now, what physics does is it tells us a very predictable pattern of when this happens, then this happens. All right, that makes sense, right? When something falls, gravity is going to, make it fall. What we have discovered since the introduction of quantum physics is that the physics that we learned about in school is really only applying to a set of molecules that come together to create a bigger mass. When we introduced quantum physics, really all this is it's telling us that when we look at the building blocks of all matter, the atom, that the structures do not behave in the same predictable manner as they do when the masses come together and give us what we see in Newtonian physics. And so quantum physics is really, in a nutshell, the basic understanding and the basic study of how atoms actually behave. Now, what's really interesting is that Albert Einstein experienced some very interesting things when he looked at the behavior of atoms, specifically when they discovered the very, very simple way that the electrons were moving around the nucleus of the atom. They actually changed the behavior based on the observer and what the observer was thinking and looking at. Now, what that means is that the atoms, the very smallest building block of all things, can actually be influenced by our thoughts, by our observation, that there is no predictability. And in fact, Albert Einstein called this the spooky science at a distance, because you can do this from a distance because of quantum entanglement. We're not going to get into all that, but what I want you to understand is that quantum physics is really just a study of atoms, and that atoms behave differently than bigger molecules. Okay, that's about it. Now, in order for us to really be able to appreciate the AO technology, I just want to just put this out there. Everything in our universe is made up of atoms. That means that the sweater that I'm wearing, the window glass that's next to me in my office, the microphone in front of me, my body is all made up of atoms. Now, what is an atom? An atom is really just a tiny little nucleus that is being surrounded by moving electrons. And when we look at this in more detail, we realize that because everything is made up of atoms, and atoms are really just a nucleus with tiny little electrons rotating around it, it means that everything is moving at all times. And the movement of those electrons are measured in frequency, specifically in hertz. So when we think about frequency, when we think about energy, it's really just acknowledging the movement of these electrons in all matter, okay? Now, I'm going to give you just a really practical example of this. My window next to me is solid, right? I can knock on it, it appears solid. I can't, walk, transport myself through it. But light and sound can actually make its way through that glass. So even though it appears solid, it is not, because light molecules can travel through it. The same way with my office right now, my door is shut, my office has four walls, but if my dog started to bark in the other room, the sound from his bark would get to my office, even though the walls and the doors are solid. Nothing in our universe is actually truly solid. It is just made up of, whether it be more tightly packed or loosely packed atoms that are forming what we see, what we feel around us. Okay, so everything is made up of atoms. Everything is always constantly in motion. Kind of cool, huh? Now, what I also want to acknowledge is that our thoughts are energy. And so when we actually look at what's going on inside of our brain, these are neurons, these are cells inside of our brain tissue. And when the cells are communicating with each other, it actually looks just like this. It is energy. Our thoughts, when they communicate with other nerves inside of our brain or outside of ourselves, such as the influence of atoms outside of ourselves, just like Albert Einstein discovered, are actually energy and can influence other particles of energy. So neat. This is another example of how our brain and how our thoughts are energy, because doctors and medical staff actually will look at our brain waves. And if you want to take a closer look at this diagram, you'll notice that the gamma, the beta, the alpha, the theta, the delta are measured in hertz. They are waveforms made up of frequency caused by the energy, the electrons in the atoms. How cool is that? Now, the other thing that's really interesting, and a lot of people don't realize this, is that because our bodies and all inanimate objects as well are always in motion because of the atoms, we actually express a biofield outside of ourselves. In fact, thermo imaging can actually see this heat basically coming out of our body. And this is because of the energy produced by the cells, energy produced by the atoms, energy produced by the electrons that are rotating within the atom. Okay. And so we have this beautiful field of energy that surrounds us at all times. In addition, every single cell then in your body has a baseline frequency when healthy. So if we think about this, every single cell in our body is made up of atoms. And these atoms have to have nucleuses that are being surrounded by electrons. And when we have a healthy cell, it should vibrate at a specific frequency. So scientists have been able to figure out that, for example, the human pancreas cell vibrates at such and such a hertz, that the healthy red blood cell in a human vibrates at such and such a hertz. And so we have baseline frequencies of how fast or how slow various cells or organs in our body are supposed to be vibrating at the cellular and anatomic level. Now, the other thing that I want to mention here is the concept of waves. Okay, so those of you guys who are old enough to remember Casey Kasem in our top 40 countdown back in the 90s, we remember that I used to sit and I would listen to the radio and I would record the top 40 on my cassette tape on my boombox for my mixtape. Okay. Now, many of you guys listening to this have no idea what the heck I'm talking about, but hopefully you can just understand the concept that when Casey Kasem was in the studio in LA and I was in my tiny bedroom in rural Minnesota, I could pick up on his radio station. Why? Because of the electromagnetic waves that were coming out of the studio, and they were being picked up by the radio station near my hometown. Now, one of the things that's really fascinating when we think about these electromagnetic waves is that there's so many things in our life that are examples of this. So when we think of the radio waves, like I'm telling you now, the microwave, visible rays from light and from color, as well as X-rays and gamma rays that we use in hospitals. And one of the things that's interesting is that all of these examples are examples of electromagnetic waves. And that means that they all are impacted by the electric fields and the magnetic fields around it. which is why if I have a radio station on in my car near my hometown, and as I'm driving down the interstate, eventually that radio station will no longer come in because it's being impacted by the distance of the electric and the magnetic field. That is important because when we think about the electromagnetic waves and how they lose their power over a distance, we actually can appreciate even more the fact that the AO scan technology uses something called scalar waves. Now, scalar waves are a very new discovery in the field of quantum mechanics, and scalar waves are thought to have zero difference in their power at a distance. And so when we think of scalar waves, this is what's happening in our mind. This is why, for example, you might be thinking of someone and they ended up calling you later that day. This is how prayer works. So when I pray for somebody, no matter where they are in the world, and they know that I'm praying for them, they can feel it. This is because of scalar waves. It is not impacted by space or time. It's very consistent and instantaneous, okay? And so scalar waves are how this technology works. Now, the other concept that I want to tell you about is resonance energy, and this is a great example.
The sound waves from this tuning fork will cause this box to vibrate. When that box vibrates, it makes the tuning fork vibrate. So when I do this, I'm going to hit this tuning fork, but you can still hear it vibrating. A lot of times people think it's the original tuning fork still making noise, but it's the other one.
All right, so this is again how this technology is going to work. So I am able to pull up the software from my phone, from my computer, from an iPad, and that software is able to use resonance energy, just like the tuning, for example, and scalar waves to read and deliver energy to a biofield. So in my technology, in my scanning technology, I can have a target and it will allow that target to be read using their biofield. I can allow scalar waves as resonance energy to be able to read and then deliver. And I'm going to give you guys some examples of that. But I wanted to give you some very, very basic technology and science behind it so that you can understand that there is amazing science and technology behind this, and that none of you have to know any of these details. But I want you to understand that you can have hope and faith in the technology and the science that's backing it. Now, what I'm going to do next is go over some AO overview. Okay, so I'm going to take you into the actual technology here in just a moment. Okay, so here we are inside of the AO scan software. So app.aoscan.com, and you should have gotten an email to help you have access to this as well. Now, the very first thing that I want to point out is the AO scan logo in the upper left-hand corner is always going to be home base. So this is going to be always going to take you back to home base, okay? Now, the next thing that I want to do is to bring up the fact that we have to make sure that we have established who is the recipient, what biofield are we reading? And in order for us to do that, we have to have the client profile in the system. So when I go in, I want to make sure that I have created a new client profile for every single person that I'm going to read. And what you do here is you enter their first name, their last name, their email address, because you can send them reports, including yourself, their gender. Now, this is important. It's the gender that they were born with, because the biofield is going to pick up on the organs that are inside of their body, their height, their weight, and then their birth date. Okay. Now, these are important because what this is doing is it's giving our program a digital thumbprint of the person, the target. So think about this like the scanning software is like KSM at the radio station in LA, and that the person, the client that we're putting in here is the radio station, the little radio station in rural Minnesota. So when I put my information in here, this is like my 98.6, okay? And so you're going to go ahead and enter all this information, and then when you're done, you can just hit finish, okay? So I have myself in here already, and you're going to want to always make sure that the client that you want to be reading is the one that is present in here. Okay. A couple of other things that I want to point out as a basic overview. In the upper right hand corner, you will always see this little tiny question mark. When you click on that, it's going to give you some very basic instructions. In addition, you have access to downloading the PDF of the actual large guide if you want some more guidance around this. So you can always go to that. For example, if I hit on this very first button, I can go over to this tiny little question mark and it's going to pull up some instructions for that particular part of the program. Okay, so that's really great. You always have access to things like that. Now, what I also want to do is point out a couple of things. And as you start to play with this over the next couple of days, these are some things that you're going to want to know. Number one, how to create a new client, first and foremost. Number two, you can search for existing clients. So once you have people in here, this is how you find them to make sure that you can read and deliver energy to them. Okay. I also can add pets. My dog is in here. Okay. I can add spaces and objects, and I'm going to teach you this in a couple of days, but you can add things like your rooms. You can add things like your bank account. So I'm not going to waste any more time there. And then I also want to just pay attention to the fact that we can add different therapies. So I can put in here, for example, if I want to add different therapies like a massage. I have a PEMF mat that I want to know if the scanner is telling me that would be a good therapy for today. Maybe I just need to have a nap. So this is going to allow for the scanner to scan my biofield and tell me what therapies as well as supplements that I can use. So if you are looking for mindset help, this is going to be a really great tool that you can use. Okay. And the other thing is client groups, and we're going to get into that in a couple of days as well. So I just want you to know that that's there. Okay, we're going to go back again, upper left-hand corner. I'm going to go back to the main screen. And what I want to teach you is just one of the programs today, and we're going to get into the other ones over the next few days. But I'm going to go to Quick Scan. Now, Quick Scan is something that I use every single day as part of my routine. One of the first things that I do every single day as I hit the clearing, this is going to give me a 20-second energetic clearing of my biofield. So if you are around a lot of stressful people, around a toxic environment, if you are a service provider and you are around people all day long and you're an introvert, you need to protect your space, this is a great way to do it. So right after I clear, I then shield. And then I also do an EMF shield every day because we are surrounded by technology all day long. 5G internet, we have our phones with us always. And so I'm going to use an EMF shield to shield my biofield from all of the toxic EMF that I'm exposed to every single day in our modern world. Okay. And the other thing that I absolutely love using are things like these 3-minute boosts. So I can decide based on what I need at the moment. I can click on this and it's going to give me minutes of music that's going to shift my energetic field. The one for grounding is one that I use every single day. I love this one so much because it allows for me to just be grounded. And I love doing that several times a day. I also will use the focus one if I need to get to work. And neuroaerobics will give me a little bit of energy as well as supercharger. So I wanted to let you know that those are a couple of different things that you have access to. And tomorrow, what we're going to do is get into the inner voice as our very first thing. So I hope that this was helpful to you, and I'm looking forward to teaching you more tomorrow. Bye.